evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to a conversation about Africa's growth and integration with our guest, Mr. Kassoum Coulibaly. Obviously, Africa has a land area or a land mass bigger than India, China, the US, and Europe combined. Few doubt the scale of the African continent and its resources. However, until recently, only some have seen it as a growth market that is fast becoming. With a steadily growing population heading towards 2 billion, Africa's 1.1 billion workforce will be the world's largest by 2040. Equally, with a collective GDP of $2.6 trillion by 2020 and 1.4 trillion of consumer spending, many see the impact around 500 million new middle-class consumers coming from Africa. Africa as a continent has on average grown its economies by 5% per annum over the last decade. It is already as urbanized as China and has as many cities of over 1 million population as Europe. Our guest speaker today, Mr. Kassoum Coulibaly, is an economist, a strategist, an intellectual, and a social entrepreneur, motivated and committed for the global economic progress. He has over 20 years of working experience with the youth and women and sustainable development across Africa and in the world. He's now dedicating his life for the promotion of and protection of human rights, women's rights, gender equality, empowerment of women worldwide. He has worked with several international non-government organizations and UN agencies such as UNESCO, UNDP, and UNCTAD in Africa. He's also engaged with some famous global organizations such as AIESEC and the Junior Chamber International. As an African freedom fighter, economic freedom fighter, Mr. Coulibaly is also currently supporting the promotion of entrepreneurship among youth and women organizations over the last 10 years in issues of information, communication, education, training, business development, access to finance, as well as others. He's also the founder, president, CEO of the Global Institute for Women's Empowerment Group, GIWE Group, a member of Men Engage Global Alliance, and also the national coordinator of Men Engage Network Mali and vice chair of the steering committee of the Men Engage Africa Alliance. He's also a UN Women's He for She Initiative member and the co-founder of the African Development Group, ADG, the African Mining Alliance, the Alliance for Africa Renaissance, and the African Youth Center. And our guest speaker is obviously speaking to us today from his home country in Mali. We welcome Mr. Coulibaly. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for welcoming to me this conversation about African growth and integration. That's the key talking point we will have together with our participants online. And I want to thank also the President of CEO, Mr. Iman, all his team for organizing this talk today. And thank you very much. As we said that, thank you very much for the presentation you made for me. And I can say that I am proud to be an African from the north to south, from the east to west, and through Central Africa. And also to be part of the world, that because Africa is a world, because most of the people are looking at Africa, and African people are also around all over the world. And together we are working to make Africa a better place where we can live and work and to sustain our lives. So just to take a few points about what I'm doing currently in Africa, but also for young people, but also for women. Exactly 5 years ago, I have been awarded by UN Women as a global champion for women's economic empowerment. And with my friends and colleagues, we are put our strengths together to set up the Global Institute for Women Empowerment Group. That is like a comprehensive organization where we want to bring also not only women, but also men on board in a dialogue where we can try to have a world where we have a peaceful world, where we have free market, where women and men can sit together to end violence against women and to let people have peace, security, and development over the world. But primarily, our target region of working is Africa, where you also mentioned that we have about 2 billion people. And when we have 2 billion people, we have at least 1 billion women in Africa who are women and girls. So that this is a big population and where we need to work together and developing policies developing programs, projects, and activities where we can contribute to have gender equality and women's empowerment in all Africa, for African women who are in Africa, but also in the diaspora. Developing our activities, we are focused on 4 main activities at the same time. The first group of activities are studies and research. To know in Africa what the reality is, what we have, and what we know, what works, what does not work, and to know what are the gaps and where we can act in the best way to fill the gaps. So this is the first action we are doing currently in Africa. And the second group of activities are based on capacity building and training, because we cannot have a sustainable economy in Africa without developing the capacities for women, girls, and also for men and boys. So we work currently to organize training sessions in all kind of issues related to gender equality, but also for women's economic empowerment. The third thing is about technical assistance and consulting, because we cannot sustain this process of gender equality and women empowerment without supporting the government and developing good policies and developing good programs and projects, and also supporting them for implementing and monitoring and evaluation of those programs. So we do that technical assistance to countries, to governments, to local governments, but also for women's organizations and to all of the stakeholders who are working in that field. And the last thing is about advocacy and communication in general, and how we can report to the general population, all of the stakeholders, that what is happened exactly, what have been changed, and how we can improve our practices, like in policies, in the programs and projects. So those are the 4 activities we are currently doing. But now, what are we doing in relating to women's economic empowerment and developing SMEs for women in general? Since 2 years now, we have begun a program where we are implementing an incubator around Africa to support only women's entrepreneurs. So this is a program we are currently developing in from Rwanda to Mali and over African places, where we try to build a network of incubators where we can support startups built from women and girls around Africa. We are also working on a lot of, more than 22 countries now, Africa, where we can engage more men and boys in women's economic empowerment activities. Because most of the time, men are seen as barriers for women empowerment. But we see that men are part of the solution. So we need to bring them to develop with men and boys the issue of positive masculinities, where men can engage on dialogues and policy development and program design and implementation and monitoring and evaluation at both levels. And now, what can I say more about our activities now? The main challenges we have now in Africa supporting women and girls and boys and men in SME development are facing on 4 issues exactly. The first now in Africa is how we can make Africa a place to live, to the place where we can invest, where we can develop SMEs, is to facilitate and enable an environment where women and girls, men and boys can develop their own SMEs. So this is something very interesting where we need to look on that, because the business environment is sometimes quite challenging for men and women, but also for girls and women. So we need to see how we can contribute to accelerate this business environment change process, where we can have an ecosystem where we can facilitate business for creation and development, as long as the value chains we can have during the process of business development. Second thing is access to finance. The second challenge we have now currently for African integration and growth for SMEs in general is access to finance. There are a lot of financial institutions like banks in Africa, but most of the time, banks are not understanding what is the SME sector and how best they can support the creation and development. This is something challenging we need to see, and how we can address some specific financial facilities and systems that women and girls and men and boys can access to develop their SMEs. This is the second challenge we can look on that. And the third challenge is also capacity building. Most of the time, when you see specifically French-speaking countries, we have not been organized and trained to develop entrepreneurs. Most of the people have been trained to become salaries. And when we see the environment, it's sometimes to see we don't have many entrepreneurs. We need to see how we can educate young men, young women to have the entrepreneurship mindset from the primary school to universities. I think that's something very interesting we need to see together with AIESEC what kind of entrepreneurship development program we can have in our schools during our process of educating young boys and girls during the system. And the fourth thing in challenging is how we can make the SMEs to access to market. Is the local market, but also, you know, the African market, but also the international market. How we can facilitate access to market by using technologies in the fourth revolution period now, how we can make African SMEs to access to market by using technologies. This is the fourth point I can touch. But let me tell you, now in Africa, we have a good opportunity, but I want to highlight 6 reasons why we need to support African economy, or we need to invest in Africa, because there are a lot of potential for African big companies, but also for small and medium and small and medium enterprises in Africa. First, Africa needs connectors. When I say connectors, it's about roads, rails, ports, airports. There is a lot of opportunities on that connectors where people can invest in Africa to make integration of Africa. And also we can develop in the value chains of those, connectors development process. We can have a lot of opportunities to invest in SMEs who are already working in that, but to bring also technologies that can be help of these SMEs in that sectors and those sectors to grow and to create jobs and to create wealth for themselves and for all of the investors. The second reason to invest in Africa now is that Africa's barriers are failing now. You already know that Africa is in the process to develop the African Continental Trade Agreement, AfCFTA, that is in place, has been signed by more than 40 countries in 55, sometimes 4 and 5 countries in Africa. So this is an opportunity where the barriers are failing inside Africa, and we are becoming a one market, where you can say that Mr. Ahmed President said that we have more than 2 billion people. So it will become a big market where we can have, potential for SMEs to grow, and also for investment to see how they can invest in SMEs in that market. And the third point where I can say the third reason where we can have the opportunity to invest in Africa is like customers are changing. When we say that the growth of Africa in the last 10 years, we can see that we have beginning to have a middle class in Africa, where people have the ability to buy, they have the potential, the capacity to buy. So those customers in Africa are changing. They are now well informed. They know what they need, and they need quality goods, and they need to buy something interesting coming from Africa, because they trust Africa and they trust African products and services. The fourth reason we need to have Africa, to invest in Africa, is the digital transformation today. You know already that we have in the first revolution, industrial revolution, and the digitalization of Africa is growing. We can see in each African capital cities where we have young men and young women who are very good innovators are developing mobile applications to solve some problems in health, in fintech, in the robotics, and a lot of sectors where we have the digitalization opportunities in public services, in private services, and e-commerce, and a lot of opportunities. And you see that Alibaba is coming to support African, digital entrepreneurs in Africa, and we have a lot of SMEs and startups in the digital sector who are growing, where we can invest a lot. And also Africa is diversifying. The fifth point is like that. We are moving from a rural Africa to a high city development process in Africa. And cities are now taking place in the changing process of Africa. We are coming from the rural Africa now to the city of Africa, where we have the cities who are growing, who are going to have infrastructures, who are linked to other big cities in Africa. You can have Johannesburg, you can have Cairo, to say that from Mr. Chairman's city, we have Lagos, we have Addis Ababa, we have Casablanca, we have some big cities who are growing, and African people are now showing a new face about our development. And lastly, we can say that Africa is linking to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we say that we can have all of the challenge, but Africa is one of the part of the world where the Sustainable Development has been fulfilling in the process. And we hope that the Agenda 2030 will be the place where African people will be able to target these 17 goals in Africa. And when we see that the Africa Agenda 2063, also we are also currently working to see, beside all of the challenges we can have about rewards, but defend that Africa is the best place where we can invest, where the SMEs are the most dynamic in the world. Because when we see the economy of Africa, we have about 90% SMEs inside the Africa economy. And those SMEs are creating the 55% of jobs in Africa in total. So we see that this is a big opportunity where AIESEC and our Global Institute for Women's Empowerment Group can have a very good challenge, but a very good opportunity where we can develop together some good programs to address for young entrepreneurs and also for women entrepreneurs, so we can make Africa a better place that can contribute to a better place in the world. So I can stop here, Chairman, and to have a discussion with the participants. Thank you very much for this conversation, and I hope it can be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coulibaly. This was a very good introduction and excellent insights about the potential of our African continent. As you're working a lot with women entrepreneurs, what do you see as the main challenges they face working in Africa?
Yes, the main challenge we have for Africa is that first, Africa is a place where we have a lot of challenge in gender equality in general. When I say gender equality, Africa is a country where the patriarchy is so developed. It's the long history of patriarchy. And most of the countries in Africa where we have the main agricultural sector, where we have a lot of women working there, are facing like access to land, when I can say agriculture. When I take just an example in Mali, we have just 4% women who have the rights on their land. 4%, 1, 2, 3, 4, I say, the property rights on the land. And we have just 20% of women that can benefit to using land to develop the agricultural sector. When we see that, only that, for getting access to land, for me, is the best challenge in Africa, agricultural and food development now in Africa. So we need to look at how we can work together to facilitate access to land for women so that they can grow, the agricultural activities. Because what I said that, every year now Africa import more than 30 billion US dollar for food now. And when we are going to 2030, Africa will import more than 100 billion US dollar in food. You see this big market. And when we will be able to facilitate access to land for women, we are sure that they can produce good, food, crops, that can be transformed in agriculture, in kind of industrialization in the food industry, so we can have, to retain those 100 billion USD in Africa, so we can make creating good wealth and jobs for women and girls. The second challenge of what I say that I can say for women is access to technology. Most of the time, technologies are owned by men, and has been controlled by men in general. So how can we facilitate access to that technology for women also? It's like to develop their business and like to be connected, to be access to markets. But the third challenge for women is also access to market, because most of the time when women are not allowed to access to finance, to grow, they don't access to have land, they don't access to technology, how can they move to access to international markets? Because sometimes some countries coming from men don't allow them to travel, don't allow them to go from another city to another city. It can be challenging. That's why I said that from the fourth point of an opportunity for Africa, how we can make digitalization something very important for us, is that will allow women to access to market. So for me, those are the 4 and 3 big challenges for African women that we are facing right now. But I cannot forget that access to education is very important. When we see the rate of access to education, basic education is something very important. Because when you don't access to basic education, it can be difficult on some time to find for financial inclusion, where we can have financial education for women also at a certain level. But access to education is something very important. But I can also mention that access to health is a big challenge also, because when we see most of the African women don't have access to sexual and reproductive rights and health in Africa. So it's difficult when a woman can sometimes cannot manage this process. It can be difficult for them to have good health and to get time to invest in their business, because they have a lot of domestic unpaid care work that they are facing in their works currently. So those are some points I can highlight about challenges women are facing. Last but not least, women in Africa are facing a lot of gender-based violence. And I can say, especially, violence against women and girls. And the WHO, World Health Organization, has also already experienced 1 in 3 women in their life has experienced gender-based violence and sometimes domestic violence in their life. So this is a very good, this is a challenge we need to highlight, because when we didn't stop with violence against women, it can be challenging for them to be active in the economic sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this discussion. We've started getting some questions through our Zoom chat from our colleague Nemadi Medici. He's asking, would you agree that Africa poses most of its own problems? In other words, the marginalization of Africa is self-inflicted?
It's a good question. You know, all in my short life now in the world, I experienced that when you have a positive mind for yourself, on your family, and your country, and your continent, you can be able to do good things. And most of the time, when we see Africa's situation, we know that African own sons, you know, are destroying the countries. And when you see the governance challenge we have most of the time, it's not made by other people. First, these challenges are coming from our own African people. When we are killing each other, you know, facing a lot of wars, maybe you can see maybe in Mali, in West African countries, especially in the Sahel region, when we see we are killing each other in countries, when we are stealing our money, when we are our Africans are so corrupted, you know, we are destroying our own wealth, you know, we can see that we are putting a negative face of Africa in, you know, in face of the world. So this is something we need to change as soon as possible to have, you know, a good face we can show to ourselves, but also to over the world. So we can try to change the mindset we have and to see how we can educate our population in the best way to have a positive view and a positive vision, and how we can make Africa a better place where everyone in the world can come, invest, develop his business, create wealth, create job, and to make an integration a sustainable process, though, where we can also all of us being happy in that situation. So it's right. Sometimes and most of the time, we as Africans, we are the people who are destroying ourselves. So we need to change it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this question was quite good because we normally like to, you know, destruct ourselves as Africans and always talk about the negatives and not the positives. Obviously, looking at the continent and how it's being developed in the last few years, we've seen a very good example of Rwanda as a country.
Yes.
They've come out of a civil war. They've come out united now, and they're doing very, very well economically and in terms of safety and security. And they're in the top ranked countries in the world in the ease of doing business. So when there is a will and there is youth and there is, as Kassoum said earlier, let's say less corruption, I think we all have potential as Africans to grow immensely. We have another question from our dear friend Edgar below. He asks you, how do you see African family structure and the development of the continent? Everyone is talking, Kassoum, about, you know, all the smart Africans leaving the continent, the brain drain, as they call it. So how do you see the continent developing? How do you see the family structure?
Well, this is a good question. Some people, Africans, say that, oh, we need to grow because the African continent space is so big. So we need to continue to grow our population and to have maybe 5 billion people inside. Yes, it can be true. But for me, it's better to have 2 or 3 kids in a family where we have time to educate them very well, when we have the resources to give them good health, when we have the time to have a dialogue between wives and our husbands, when we have a vision where we can grow our families in the best way. Because when we see Africa 50 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, we need the population to grow our agriculture in a traditional way. But today we can have access to technology. We don't need a lot of people to grow our farms. We need technologies. We need new ideas. We need good seeds. We need different way to live. So for me, we need to see what kind of population we need to have, for which Africa we need in 50 years, next 50 years in the world. This is a good question. And now the African Union is now in the process to develop a common Africa position on population and development. because it's a process where we need a new discussion after the ICPD. The ICPD held in Egypt in 1994 conference. The ICPD conference held that we designed the global population and development, strategy and vision. And now Africa is trying to discuss and to collect information from civil society, from the government, from the private sector, to say that in Africa now, what is our common Africa position on population and development? Because we cannot continue to have a woman with 60 children or 5 or 7 children where we cannot access to give them good health, where we are not able to give us, to feed them, where we are not able to educate them, where we are not able, able to let them integrate with over African continent people. So this is something which is strategic with the African Union to see how we can integrate. But for me, we need to look on that, having a family with 2 or 3 kids where we can have time to educate them, to give them good health, to give them good knowledge, to let them travel, inside Africa, to integrate with over African people. I feel that it can be something very good, and we can take care of ourselves, and we can invest in them, and to let them grow in the best way, and to contribute to development of Africa. So this is my position on that. And I want to mention something coming back to the challenge about the negative issues we need to have. African Union have also said that this year, 2020, is the year for silencing the guns in Africa. So we are working now to promote, and before the end of this year, 2020, how can we silence the guns? Because we were silencing the guns in Africa, we cannot have time for dialogue. We don't have time to set a good vision for Africa. We don't have time to develop our SMEs in general, but we cannot bring investors in Africa and to develop our continent with African people, but also with international investors and partners. So this is a point we need to highlight also, and to work together to have peace in the continent, and so we can make development for sustainable development for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Professor Hartmut Meyer in Germany, our dear ICSB colleague, and he's asking, how can Europe contribute to foster the entrepreneurial ecosystem, in particular to support the success of startups in Africa?
Thank you very much. This is a very good question. Africa is not living in an autarky, like Africa is living itself in maybe 1,000 years ago. No, Africa is the world. So every part of the world, which are Europeans, Americans, Chinese, Indians, have an interest in Africa, but also Africans have interest in the world. What we need that now is the concept of co-entrepreneurship. This is the concept I wanted to. We need to develop co-entrepreneurship between Africa and the world. So this entrepreneurship ecosystem development can be a co-entrepreneurship ecosystem development, because we need to integrate Africa in the global value chains, where we need to defend the interests of Africans and SMEs, but also the interests of other enterprises and companies who are over the world. We need to see in the global value chain, how can we work in the best way, where all of the actors, from the land to the table where we eat, where we can all benefit from the development of all of the value chains and all of the enterprises who are inside, who are working in the value chains. I find that this is something very important, where we need to see, we don't want to work in the old way, where some people are coming just to pick something inside, Africa and go away. We need to see where we can work together and to benefit for Africans and for non-Africans in the entrepreneurship development process. And we know that the European countries, as much as possible, they have good experience how to redesign or how to organize the ecosystem. So we need the expertise, we need the technologies, we need the approach, and together we need to have good ecosystem where they can also come and invest, and the SMEs also can come and to have joint ventures with African SMEs where they can together invest, because African SMEs who are already in the market, they knows maybe more of the market than the people who come from outside. And they can create together joint ventures and invest and work together to develop wealth and to open the global market for all of the people who are involved in the process. I find that this is something very interesting, and they also contribute to capacity building, and they can also contribute to the knowledge development of the economy at the global level. So all of the parts from Europe and Africa can co-create, co-invest, and co-develop the activities with SMEs and startups. And we know that the startups and the technology, the digital sector, the agriculture there is so vibrant, so we have a lot of things to do together, so we can make the better world we can have together.
Thank you very much. We have another interesting question from Namadi Medici. It's a tricky one, huh? Do you think that Africa might be throwing away the baby with bathwater by ignoring the other half of gender, i.e. men? And I see this as, a topic for discussion. Give us your thoughts. And he's referred obviously to a World Bank publication on this.
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
So the question is, do you think that Africa is throwing away the baby with bathwater by ignoring men from the business? Yeah, everything is about women empowerment now, whether in health, in business, in everything. So are African men being ignored in a way?
This is a good question and a good point. When I began engaging myself as a professional, working on the gender equality and women's empowerment, I realized by my gender analysis in the system and getting data and to analyze this by qualitative analysis to see what is missing in the process. The process, when we discuss about gender equality, that we are missing to involve men and boys in the process. Because in the 60s years, we were working on women in development process. Women in development process. So we go to some place and we say that women must access to technology, they give them technology only. Women must water, they need water, they get water. But we are not answering themselves, what is the place of, what is the role of men in that issue? And we grow now, we are in the process of getting in gender and development, where we need to go from gender toxic activities to gender transformative activities, where we need to have men on board for dialogue by doing the gender analysis first, by designing the programs that can be transformative for gender equality and women's empowerment. But there's a lot of frameworks we can use on that. Myself, we are working in an alliance called Men Engage Alliance. It's like a global alliance that headquarters in Washington, DC also, that we are working to engage men and boys. And we are currently working in Africa in 22 countries, where we develop positive masculinities programs in all of the sectors. Our first target and priorities are gender-based violence, women's economic empowerment, peace and security in Africa. And third priority action, we work also in sexual and health and reproductive health rights, sector, but we think that all of the time, when you are not involving men in the process, it's difficult to get gender equality, and we cannot let men behind. We need to work to have men on board all the time. And also, UN Women has already understood that this process is very relevant. They are also launched the process of he-for-she initiative. I don't know, you are already aware of that. Men organizations are using that. And by doing that, we do in each Africa country where we are working what we call the International Men and Gender Equality Survey. What is called is a framework called IMAGES. This is an activity of research we do in each African country to know exactly how is the situation of engaging men and boys, and where are the gaps, what is missing, and what we need to do. So that this is a very good question, but it's a hard question, because I said that before in my introduction speech, that we are in a continent of patriarchy, where we have the gender norms who has been developed inside men in our communities, in our countries, which are difficult to change in the short way. It's a long-term process. And I trust that if you continue to work, we can be able to change the gender norms in the society and to engage more people, especially men and boys, in the gender equality and women's empowerment programs and process. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. We have another question also. What is your position on the non-existence of the West African Examinations Council, WAEC, which was founded in 1952 to integrate the education across the sub-region, but alas, it no more exists? Do you have any thoughts on this Western African Examination Council, Kassoum?
Africa Examination on?
West Africa Examination Council. I can jump in here because I've read a lot about the council and the block and the work they've been doing. I think what it lacks is basically enforcement in the countries, because it's an optional thing for countries to enroll into this council. I think a lot of the curriculums they have currently are a bit outdated when you look at them from an apprenticeship or a technical point of view. I've seen syllabi on things like shorthand, which is like obsolete now, and a lot of other topics. So I think, you know, it has to be modernized in a way. It has to be more up to date with the skills of the future rather than the skills of the past. But in terms of, you know, economic blocks, education blocks all around the continent, I think it was a thing of the past. We thought that we could do it this way. I think now with the digital world we're living in, people learn through different forms and different methods. And we've seen through COVID-19 how people are all online and learning through different things. So I think it needs a revamp on the way forward and the thinking and the deep-rooted issues the African continent needs in terms of education. I hope it works, because it was a great thing to happen in this continent. But as you know, Madi has asked, it hasn't been very effective, if I may say. Maybe for I don't know what the reasons are, to be honest. We have another question from Dharma. Africa is a continent rich in human and non-human resources. Women entrepreneurs have a significant role to play in business, family, and social development. But the environmental factors in which entrepreneurship can flourish need to be made friendlier. The success of Rwanda, the level of governance, taxation, rule of law, freedom, women entrepreneurship can flourish to make it better and fair. I think this is like rather of an opinion Dharma has stated, which basically coincides with all the good work you've been doing, Kassoum. But my question to you is, in terms of the initiatives and project your GIWE has done, what is a great success story you really are proud of and you like to showcase?
Thank you very much for this question. I think that it's very important to have a good environment where we can enable entrepreneurs to work. But the main thing for me is that the vision our head of states, head of governments can have in that situation. Basically, when you see French-speaking countries in Africa in general, we have these colonized by France, and we know that the way of thinking in the Francophone countries are not an entrepreneurship way of thinking, you know. So that it's difficult to have this kind of environment like in Egypt or Kenya or for South Africa, where we have, or Ghana, where we have some mindset has been developed by the, you know, England colonized countries. So this is something we need to look at that. But what I am very proud of what we have been doing in our Global Institute is to bring the way that investing in women's entrepreneurship is something very important when we need to change the face of the economy. This is the awareness work we have done, because this is very important. We have 50% of women in the countries, like in Africa. And we have those women who are half of the capacity, production capacity, and they are making part of their outside of the production process. And how can we leave the poverty situation in which we have without involving those women in the process? So that this is something very important to make awareness that we have a good potential in investing and unlocking the potential of women. That's something very important we have done. We have done in the countries where we are currently working. The second thing where we are working a lot is to facilitate financial inclusion for women. We have been working with a lot of organizations and the head of states, and we want to greet the president of Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of the Republic of South Africa, now, who has decided to make the 10 years from 2020 to 2030 as the decade for financial inclusion for women. Something that we need to congratulate ourselves and the global women, you know, feminist organization who are supporting, you know, women's economic empowerment, that we have that in place. So with ICSB, we need to touch this decade because the head of state in Africa have decided to put the next 10 years for women in Africa. So this is a great success we have done, not only ourselves only, but the group of you know, civil society organization engaged in women and economic empowerment in Africa. So this is something we need to have and to design, you know, a decade on women's SME development program. I think that our institute on ICSB can design, based on that, a program to support women's entrepreneurship development program for women in Africa. And I think that setting up this GIWE ISB joint initiative on Women's Entrepreneurship Academy can be something very important, where we can realize all kind of activities on financial education, SME development programs, technical advice, and so a lot of we can address to Africa. So this is something very important for me, that is important. And now, what we are doing again in our success is that we are bringing more and more men on board on women's economic activities. I'm saying that now we are currently working on 22 countries in Africa. This is a big success. 32 countries in Africa is like half Africa. We have already touched in that process. And our goal in the 2030 is to be in all 54 countries in Africa, where we can have a movement where we can engage more and more men in women's economic empowerment activities in that process. And we are, in a way, getting all of those three activities are very important. But also, last thing, which is important for us, we have designed a model of women's incubators, what we call African Women's Entrepreneurship Centers, where we need to implement in each African country. We have already begun 2 models in Rwanda for English-speaking countries, in Mali for French-speaking countries. And our plan is to expand this model in each African countries where we can support startups from Africa and so on. The last thing in the financial level, so that we are now trying to launch our financial institution, okay, for women entrepreneurs. And this is our key project now, where we can facilitate access to finance for women as a seed fund, but also for acceleration of the development. So I find that this is the 4 and 5, success we can bring on board now that we need to continue to improve in Africa, but also working with other partners in Africa, in the world, that we can continue to improve those successes in the continent. Thank you very much for this question.
Thank you very, very much, Kassoum. And I think as ICSB, we are definitely, giving you a support hand, and we will work with you on establishing our first knowledge hub in West Africa, in Mali, with GIWE. Also, one of our board members, Mr. Amar Abulazm, is an expert on microfinance and micro enterprises, so I'm sure he would be of support in establishing a women micro lending program for women empowerment through your organization. I think we're done with questions. I want to ask you, do you have any concluding remarks before I say my concluding remarks?
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank you, Chairman, for this opportunity for this dialogue about Africa growth and integration, also especially for how we can integrate women's economic empowerment in that process in Africa, but also in the world. I find that the partnership we are developing now with ICSB is quite strategic and quite historical, because now together we are putting our strengths together to make Africa, a place where the SMEs in the leading by women and men can be a success story in the world. And what I can say that now we need to focus on Africa. It's a call, I'm calling you from my head, to say that Africa is like a call of the paradise. Okay, let's open the paradise for the world. And the global, the global landscape of ICSB and its partners in kind of scholars and technical, people, in the thinkers, trainers, financial experts we have in that network can benefit for Africa. So let's come together, co-create a business environment in Africa where all of us, we can benefit in those SME development process for especially, and so that we can make Africa a best place where we can silence the guns by developing SMEs. I think that this is the best way to silence the guns, where we invest and we develop SMEs. When people have access to money, to finance, when they have access to job, definitely we can silence the guns in Africa, and we can integrate Africa from the north to the south, from the east to the west, and for having the central impact also on the board. And I'm so happy to thank you again, and my own behalf, but also from the all African people, and for all African head of state, and for all African women and men, girls and boys, so that together is a good challenge for us to success. And thank you very much for this opportunity, for this dialogue on Africa growth and integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Kassoum. ICSB, on behalf of the board of directors, myself as chair, as an African, we support you in what you're doing. I want to just close by saying a few statements that Africa is a continent that faces significant challenges, but these challenges, obviously, for entrepreneurs and small business owners around the world are opportunities. Africa is a place where you can grow your business, you can start your business, you can do a lot in a lot of fields, such as food security, agricultural development, environmental sustainability, facilitation of trading, financial products and service offerings, good, healthcare is an opportunity for lots of people to invest in Africa. Also education, digital, obviously literacy in general, infrastructure in terms of transportation, energy, renewable energy, solar, wind, obviously water and sanitation, ICT. Africa is, I think, a good place for people coming from Europe, from the States, from Latin America, from Asia to come and invest, to start their small businesses, to start their entrepreneurial ventures. The market is a huge market, as we said, nearly 2 billion people. It has all the resources any person might need in terms of natural resources, in terms of land, in terms of weather, climate, rain, rivers. I can just I can talk about Africa for the next 24 hours and then non-stop. But I think just to conclude, I will take from the statement that the African Union has an agenda for 2063 called the Africa We Want, which was published, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. And the vision they're looking for is a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development, an integrated continent, as Kassoum has mentioned, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision for an African Renaissance, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and rule of law, a peaceful and secure Africa, an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics, an Africa where development is people-driven, unleashing the potential of its young people and its women, Africa as a strong, united, influential global player and partner. At the end of this ICSB Exchange webinar, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Kassoum Coulibaly, for his great contribution to this webinar. I'd also like to thank all the questions and participants we've received through the chat box on this application. And I am Ahmed Osman, the chairman of ICSB, and I'd like to thank you for taking part in this exciting webinar. Thank you very much, Kassoum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.